So great. Thank you for being here so late into the evening. And thank you for doing what you do every week. I'm looking around the dais, and most of you travel at least 2 hours every week to get here and 2 hours to get back. So thanks for your service. Thanks for what you do for the people of New York State. So this year we mark the 50th anniversary of the first Earth Day. The people are marching, they're protesting as we saw earlier, and they're marching and protesting because the cost of inaction on climate change is enormous. Let me just give you a simple figure. When I look at climate change, the social cost to us here in New York State alone each year is $10.2 billion. This flows directly from the social cost of climate analysis, and that has actually been around since 2012. So I know that was talked about earlier. The social cost of carbon is not a new figure, and for New York State, it's $10.2 billion a year. It's staggering when you think of this, and a good way to address this is a good state budget. So here's really quickly all the things we'd like you to address in the executive's proposal and to change. First, we call on the state budget to establish a $1 billion climate fund. And if you're paying along attention to math, that's just 10% of what our annual costs are, the social costs of carbon. This fund will build the necessary infrastructure for clean energy, it will enhance access to clean transportation, and it will deliver resources to help communities in the state's workforce transition completely off of fossil fuels. We also call on you to reject the executive proposed transfer of $23 billion in RGGI funds to support general tax credits. Some of these have been around way before RGGI was even conceived or implemented. We also ask you to reject the $5 million in additional RGGI funds that are going to support the Environmental Protection Fund. As Senator Hoylman rightly pointed out earlier, and we agree, this is really robbing Peter to pay Paul. And also, one thing you can do in this budget is to end the RGGI raids once and for all. We actually call on the legislature to include language in the budget that will direct NYSERDA to amend its RGGI regulations to align with the equity goals and mandates of the CLCPA. We heard from Alicia Barton that they are heading down that direction. Let's mandate it in law. I'm going to move ahead quickly to the Environmental Bond Act because there are other items in our climate testimony, but in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on the Bond Act next. So first, it's been nearly a quarter of a century since we did an Environmental Bond Act. It's time to put one before the voters again. And I actually want to ask you to pull the Bond Act out of the budget discussions and do it outside. You did that last year with climate, and it was a good result because you had more time and energy to focus in the Bond Act, and you should do that again. It's important to do a Bond Act, but it's not a requirement to do it within the context of a budget negotiation. Also, a $3 billion Bond Act should go for restoring habitat and reducing flood risk and other key clean water programs. If you find that you want to advance a $5 billion Bond Act, well, we won't oppose that at all. In fact, encourage you to do it. You could include an additional $1 billion that would go into clean water programs, particularly to fund the replacement of lead water pipes, which is a huge problem for New York. And you could also spend an additional $1 billion, quite simply, on electrification for electric vehicles, setting up that publicly charging infrastructure. So it's two key ways to get to a $5 billion Bond Act after you address the $3 billion one. Clean water programs, as we heard earlier today, there's a huge demand. And while the $500 million last year was a great addition, and the $500 million this year is going to be great, you could literally spend, like that, $1 billion on shovel-ready projects that could put New Yorkers to work and clean our water. So we encourage you to do that. On the issue of solid waste, we support the executive's proposal to ban polystyrene containers and packaging, and we also urge the legislature to consider broader policies that will expand efforts to reduce plastic pollution, such as a ban on other single-use plastics. We applaud the governor's inclusion of stewardship program for carpet and mattresses, but at least when you look at these stewardship programs, we encourage you to reduce the front-end toxicity. Make products that are cleaner, that'll make them easier to recycle. So reduce the toxics in mattresses and carpets to begin with. And then finally, let me close by just reiterating our position on the EPF. We urge you to support the governor's proposed $300 million level, but urge you to look forward to expanding that. So in 5 years from now, we have a $500 million EPF. Please reject the staffing offloads into the EPF. That doesn't belong in a capital program. That's what operation budgets are for. and also reject the Reggie transfer of $5 million. We're not expanding the EPF. We shouldn't nickel and dime other important programs. And finally, the DEC needs more staff. I think that's plain. You know it, I know it. The commissioner probably knows it, but he can't say so.
Thank you, and thank you for staying within the 5 minutes.